One of the paradoxes I've learned about this is how often silence is one of the most powerful actions of helping somebody feel seen and feel heard. Um, it's just, if they say something and you just allow it to have the space to kind of land and not be talked over or solved or fixed or whatever. But this idea of like my silence is my presence.
Hi, Lyssa deHart here, and welcome to the coaching studio. Today in the studio, I'm very excited to introduce my first guest of my third season, Michael Bungay Stanier. He is an author, he's a coach, he is a speaker. You probably know him from his book, The Coaching Habit. The Advice Monster is a favorite of mine. And his most recent book, which has just come out in the last early part of this year, which is How to Work with Almost Anyone. And it's really around the key relationships in your work environment. I think his work is so pivotally important to coaches because he has such an approachable style and sharing of information. And so I really hope you enjoy this interview. So let's get into it. So, Michael, thank you so much for being on the coaching studio and for launching my season 3. So, thank you also for that. Woo.
Congratulations on getting to a season 3. That's impressive.
Well, it is been an interesting journey, I must say. That's a whole different topic for maybe another day. This podcast is primarily focused towards coaches themselves, and I'm a big believer in. I recently read your book, and I had read your prior book, The Coaching Habit, and so I really want to get into your new book and some of the things that I think really are important for coaches to use as informing their curiosity. But before we even jump into that, I'd just love to get a sense of who you are, and how you have landed in this position on this podcast with this beautiful background wall. How have you gotten here to this place in your life with your interests?
Well, whenever you tell an origin story, it always sounds like you know what you were doing and there was a kind of a destiny there. But for me, most of it was stumbling blindly into the future and making some good or lucky decisions at certain crossroads. But I am Australian originally. In fact, I'm recording this back in Australia, back in Canberra, the town where I grew up, although I mostly live in Canada and Toronto. And had a great, pleasant, delightful childhood growing up. I had I was the eldest son. Mum and dad got on really well. They were married for 57 years before dad died a couple of years ago. 2 younger brothers who I like. And so I went to local schools here in Canberra, took a year out and went to England to work for a year, which was one of those kind of accelerations into adulthood a little bit, because I worked as basically a teacher in a school. So I'm suddenly at 17 or 18 teaching 10-year-olds classes. So that probably planted the seed, because in many ways I think of myself as a teacher now. Came back to university in Australia and did both literature and law. Law is an undergraduate degree in Australia, so you can kind of combine degrees like that. But when I was 14 or so, a teacher in my high school had asked me what I wanted to do. What was I going to do after high school? And, I had only the vaguest ideas of life after high school. I wasn't that good at kind of future planning. But my dad, who I admired, was British and had gone to Oxford University. He actually grew up in Oxford, so he went as a local boy. So I went, well, I think I'll go to Oxford University, following my dad's footsteps. And the teacher said, well, you'll need to be a Rhodes Scholar to do that. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but sure, Rhodes Scholar it is. And that planted an important seed, because after one failed attempt, on the second attempt, I won a Rhodes Scholarship at the end of my kind of wrapping up my Australian degree university career. So at the age of 24 or 25, I headed over to England spent 2 years doing a master's degree in literature at Oxford, and it had two very important things. One is the second of the two is that it pulled me away from being a lawyer. I wasn't a very, I mean, I liked English literature and I did well in it, but law is always a struggle. And it was culminated with me actually being sued for defamation by one of the professors at law school. So, it really wasn't.
I don't want to dive too much into that, but I have to tell you that when I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got to be an interesting character. And I'm kind of like, how does that even happen when you're a student?
Yeah, that's a very good question. How does that happen when you're a student? The teacher was, it's an interesting precursor about kind of language and stuff that is so much more a thing these days. But a law professor was teaching us evidence. So, how does evidence work in law cases? And he was using a story to illustrate a point of law. And the story was a woman being raped. And it wasn't necessary to the point of law to have a story of a woman being raped. And a few of us talked about it, and then I became a spokesperson for this, and I stood up in class and went, can you not do, I'm sure I didn't do it as gracefully or as elegantly as this, and I probably would have done it differently now, but it's like, could you do something different than this story? And then we wrote a letter to the dean of the law school complaining about it. And the law professor's response was to sue me and others for defamation, which is like a terrible response. And then the law faculty's response was to do nothing, which is also a terrible response. It's interesting in that, 40 years later or 30 years later, it's a much more heightened world around what language you can use. And there's a way that, you can get canceled and all of this stuff, which I don't really believe in. But anyway, that was me doing my thing early on.
Well, and it's really interesting. And I don't know, I'm sure there's, I don't know, I'm just going to blurt this out here, but it is sort of interesting that here this is, you're having this conversation with this professor, and it's a difficult conversation. And you're now at this point are writing about how do you work with almost anyone. And so much of what's in that book is about how do you have these high stake kind of conversations. So, I mean, how did that experience, maybe even on some subtle undercurrent, lead you to your curiosity?
Well, I think, I'm not sure how it led to curiosity, but what I can say now in retrospect is there's something important to me around, I was going to say justice, but it's more about understanding how power works and trying to dismantle some of the power structures of the world, which all sounds very jazz hands, highfalutin. But I do think one of the things that's really powerful about coaching, particularly coaching in organizations, which is, where I think you came across my work first, or certainly where we both do some work, is that coaching and having people be more coach-like to the people that they manage, it disrupts the power structure because it moves people away from, I'm going to tell you what to do, to I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to figure out what to do. So there's a shift in accountability and responsibility and empowerment in power. So I think often what I'm doing in the work I do through the various books that I write is trying to give people power and trying to shift the way power works, which is, and there's always an interesting dance for me in the work that I do, because actually I have a lot of institutional status, privilege, power, whatever you want to call that. I'm a overeducated, successful author, straight, tall, white dude, now middle-aged. So, I hold a lot of cards around, excuse me, I hold a lot of cards around that. And I think that incident in law school was another thing around me going, in some way, trying to go, how do we disrupt power? How do we challenge stuff that feels like a misuse of power?
Yeah. Well, and I also, I mean, and as you're saying that, the thing that really shows up for me, and I too, I mean, I fit within the sphere of privilege as
Mhm.
a probably overeducated white female, right? And that I think there's this disruption of power is crucial because like in reading your book, I studied with John Gottman's work for many years. And so like,
Yeah.
how do you have relationships work? And I did couples work, and I was a therapist before I became a coach. So that's sort of my background, and really looking at how do we have conversations that are safe. And I know from what I'm hearing you say, my experience of that is when you try and have a conversation like a student to an instructor, you're transactionally, right? You've got that imbalance of power regardless. And for the person in a position of power not to be willing to come down and maybe not be in the child role, but maybe in a novice role of curiosity so that you
Right.
can have more of an adult to adult experience with somebody, or give them power, because there are so many places in which that the other person's voice is disempowered. So as a
Yeah.
student, as a person of, well, I'm not a person of color, as a female, right? Like in any of these different places, how do we allow that to happen?
It's
And I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
you're referencing, I think, like transactional analysis, TA, when you talk about parent-child relationships and adult-to-adult relationships. And I find that a helpful model. I mean, it's quite laden with therapy-ness, so sometimes that model doesn't work in some contexts. But this idea of how do you help people build adult-to-adult relationships, um, it's at an individual level trying to understand when am I being parenty and when am I being childy, but at another level it's also a kind of structural issue, which is like how do we just recognize that there will always be an imbalance in a relationship, and wherever you are in that you can realize that and start playing with that and start influencing that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, that issue of that you talk about, you bring in Amy Edmondson's work around psychological safety, which I think is really imperative. And I think it's really important for coaches to understand also, because they too hold power, even if it's implicit
Mm-hmm.
power within the conversation.
Yeah.
I've always sort of felt whoever asks the questions honestly holds the power in the
Right.
conversation. And so, like, bringing that psychological safety into our coaching conversations or into conversations as a manager by giving up some of our power. And you talk about it in your book as courage and bravery,
Yeah.
really. Can you speak about how one starts that process in your mind of learning how to let go of power, maybe is the right word, or maybe just allows themselves to open up to not like playing with these power differentials?
Oh, that's about a 4.5 hour answer.
Okay,
So, but
go.
where I might go, um, there's there's um, an experience of giving up power is a shift from certainty to uncertainty. Um, our brain loves certainty. Our brain is very primitively wired to go, look, one of the things I look for is certainty, because certainty means safety and safety means survival.
Right.
So, if you start off by if you start off with the brain, look, the brain's one job is to keep you alive, because the brain's going, look, if I keep you alive, I keep me alive, and if I keep me alive, I give a chance for my DNA to pass on to the next origin. So stay alive. And so it's constantly scanning the environment 5 times a second unconsciously to say, is it safe here or is it dangerous? It's the question the brain is asking: safe or dangerous? Safe or dangerous? And there's an acrostic I call terror, tribe, expectation, rank, and autonomy. The 4 drivers that the brain is checking in on. Tribe Are you with me or are you against me? Expectation, do I know what's about to happen? So that's certainty. Rank, am I more or less important than you? And autonomy, do I get to make the choices or not? When you have the power in the moment, in the relationship, in the context, you've kind of got a whole bunch of the terror quotient. You've got tribe. I'm here and I'm the leader of my people. You've got expectations. I'm clear on what's happening because I am the person who's making it happen. You've got rank, just naturally, and you've got autonomy because you're the leader. You get to make the choices. So the brain goes, this is awesome. You should hold on to power. Like, I've never felt better. Everybody can relax. Now, of course, it means that the people who aren't in power,
Right. Everybody can relax because I feel okay.
yeah, everybody else has got less of that. They might have some more tribe, but they don't really have expectation, and they don't have rank, and they don't really have as much autonomy. So their brain is less good. So a deliberate act to move away from power, to give up power, to empower somebody else, which means giving up some of your power so they can have it, is a kind of a thing that goes against our biological instinct. And because fundamentally, as I said, when you give up power, you give up status, you give up certainty, you give up some autonomy. And the brain's going, "What are you doing? This is crazy
You
talk."
might die.
Yeah, exactly. You might die, and it's why in the advice trap book I wrote, we talk about the advice monster. And there are three kind of versions of the advice monster. There's tell it, there's save it, and there's control it. But really, those are just they're metaphors for these three ego states, which are like, hold on to power. Because when you're telling it, you've got authority. When you're saving them, you've got authority. When you're controlling it, you've got authority and you've got power. So this is kind of the inner work, is how do you play the bigger game? How do you understand the nuance of power? Something like a Brené Brown, it's like you have to have authority and confidence to be vulnerable. How do you recognize that even as you give up power? So you ask a question, which is a small act of giving up power. You're not telling somebody what to do, but you're asking them a question. And your advice monster goes, what are you doing? Just tell them the thing. You've got all these ideas. It's in your head. Just tell them. And you're like, I'm going to give that up to be in service of that other person, what Greenway would call servant leadership. And I will learn to sit with the discomfort. Often because you realize you are holding a deeper control and a deeper power. Which is like, so when I'm in a conversation like that, I'm often aware that I'm possibly holding a bigger picture. I'm possibly holding control of the context. I'm influencing the experience by my presence and how I'm showing up, because I know people respond to the strongest signal in the room. And I know how to I know how to role model the strongest signal in the room. So I know how to role model an energy, a vibe in that room. So I've been trying to figure this stuff out for 40 years. It's not something that I just miraculously got. It's like I'm some days I'm better than other days at doing this. So the work is, you can call it spiritual development if you want. I wouldn't call myself particularly spiritual. I'm an atheist. But there is, a lot of it's like, who am I? What are my triggers? What drives me crazy? How do I, the man's search for meaning, in between, what is it? Stimulus and response lies freedom.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, part of what you're doing in trying to give up power is to recognize the gap between stimulus and response. And it's interesting that when you give up power, you perhaps find freedom.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, gosh, several different things are coming up as you're talking. And I think one of the things that I think I really want to amplify is that it's a working journey that a person is on. Like, you don't just wake up as, at 20 and like, got it. But rather it's this journey that we're on, where we're better some days than we are at other days. And I think that's really important for all of us to remember, that we're all on a journey, and that the more we're intentional and aware of these, in this particular situation, power differentials, that the more that we have the capacity then to be intentional in how we're going to respond to the power differential as it shows up.
Right.
The other thing that you said that I think, it was something that I thought about quite often when I was working with people who were quoting the coaching habit so much. And this idea of the advice monster, and what you just sort of shared a second ago, is this idea of being in service for somebody else's growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about it from the perspective, if I just tell you what to do, there's a bit of hubris there, in the sense of, do I really know what's the best thing for you to do anyway?
Yeah.
Or is there there's this one idea that I have, but if I was asking questions, you might actually come up with something even better than I would have come up with. And often I have zero dogs in the race, right? And so I can see it from this external position of, I'm your coach and I can see the bigger picture. But what do I take away from you when I don't invite you to create the dots, connect the dots, and own the dots? And so I really love what you're sharing here.
Yeah, and it's just to pick up on one thing. If your goal is to get something to happen, an action to be taken, which is often the purpose of a conversation like this, which is like, okay, so what's going to be different now? It's also just an understanding that the best idea isn't the one that wins. The idea, what wins is the thing that gets acted on. So even if you've I've got a better idea than you, but you're much more likely to act on the idea that you come up with yourself.
Yes.
So your idea is 10% worse than my idea, but it is good enough.
And it'll get done.
And it'll get done. And maybe there's a way I can influence this idea, or tweak this idea, or build on this idea, or nudge you in some way around that. But I'm always going to take somebody else's idea that's likely to get done over my idea, which may be brilliant but not get done, because it's not that brilliant if it doesn't get done.
Yeah. And I believe that your idea probably is more brilliant, but your point is very well taken, which is, if it won't be acted on, to what benefit is that brilliance at that point?
And you've got to remember, you have a very strong cognitive bias to believe that your idea is brilliant. We're pretty wired to go, I have an amazing idea here.
That's almost a whole nother conversation. And so then going into what drew you to writing this newest book, You Can Work With Almost Anyone. What was really sort of the motivation to hone in on this element of relationship?
Well, I'm trying to be a writer. So I'm already an author because I've got 7 or 8 or 9 books out in the world, but I'm trying to be a writer, meaning writing is a more central part of what I do, my practice, how I think about myself. And so I need to be writing something. So what's the project that I'm working on? And I had quite a few ideas for the next book. And I thought I was going to write a book around how change happens. So I sat down and started to write that. And in fact, I started writing about this thing instead. And, what I hope is a hallmark of my books is a kind of practicality to them. I'm trying to make this stuff feel doable. So doing 2 things, trying to unweird the idea. So, psychological safety is a bit one of those ideas that lots of people have heard of. but there's not a lot of guidance around how you do psychological safety. There's just a kind of general vibe that it's a good thing. So if you could make things psychologically safe, and it was like, yeah, I don't want to make things psychologically dangerous for people, but how do you do that? And I'm like, maybe this is a tool that can help with that. And I just realized that one of the tools that I've been teaching for some years and used myself, and I thought was really powerful, was this idea that you should have a conversation about how you work together before you plunge into the conversation about what are we working on. Because work happens through people, and the quality of your working relationships are such significant determinants on your happiness and your success. But most of the time, we don't do a lot of work around that. We just kind of cross our fingers and we hope for the best. And, we'll just kind of like, we'll see how it goes. And maybe it'll be better this time than it was last time. And I thought, like, I have a useful tool to share. So that became the origin of the book. And it feels like it's a really helpful partner to the Coaching Habit and the Advice Trap books, which are like, here are some mechanics around how you be more coach-like, even if you're not a coach. And really, I wrote these books for people who aren't coaches. I wrote because coaches have done training and I've done that. But
this is human, though. Honestly, Michael, this is human. Even if you are a coach, your ability to share this with people is very different than your ability to actually access it in the moment. So this is this human experience that we're going through.
So I think, part of what I am trying to do is bring some of the power of coaching out of the little coaching ghetto, because it's still a little bit kind of like you're either in or you're out. And if you're in, you're like, oh, coaching is amazing. And if you're out, you're like, coaching is full of weird people from California or whoever. West Coast, exactly. So I'm trying to unweird coaching.
I love unweird.
I think that's what the Coaching Habit does. It's like lots of people reading that going, if this is what they mean by coaching, I can probably have a crack at this.
Yeah.
And similarly with this new book, How to Work with Almost Anyone, I hope it's from lots of people going, okay, this doesn't feel easy, but it feels clearer as to what I might do to try and build stronger working relationships.
And I mean, and like some of your questions, and you have the questions that you could include, which is the amplify, the steady, the good date, the bad date, and the repair. It strikes me so much in some ways of just John Gottman's work to some degree, with like the repair stuff. But I love this idea. Okay, so here's a dating story. I've been married for 25 years, so this was quite a while ago that I had this date. But one of the things that and weirdly enough, that guy's name was Michael, and my husband's name is Michael. So different Michael than you, and different Michael than my husband. But he had said to me, "I never trust anybody fully until we've had a disagreement." And I was about 29, and I was like, that's so weird. Like, there's so many other emotions you could explore. Like, why would you do that one?
Yeah.
But the more I sat with it, the more it started to really make sense to me. Like, how will we be with each other? Not when things are good, because that's the easy deal, right? That's the easy button. But how will we be with each other when we're in conflict or disagreement? And I think that speaks in some ways to the good date, bad date, like what can you learn from it? But it also really speaks to what you're talking about here, which is this agreement setting on how will we be with each other.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it comes down to this even kind of the bigger question surrounding all of that, which is, are you going to actively manage the relationship, or are you going to just kind of see what happens and just kind of go? It's like whatever happens, we'll just watch it and be we'll be passive participants to our own working relationship. And it's really tempting to be a passive participant, because mostly it goes okay, and it's some ups and some downs, and you're all too busy anyway, so it's like we'll just crack on with the work. But it's this idea that, even in the good times, even in the bad times, how do you be a bit more active? How do you check in with each other? Just as you do more or less in a more intimate romantic relationship. And to your point, Lyssa, I read all of the John Gottman work. I read Esther Perel. I read Terry Real. I read Dan Siegel. I read a lot of these these kind of giants in the relationship space. And going, what do they know that I don't know around working relationships? And one of the very big ones, which you're pointing to, mentioning John Gottman again, is the relationships that last are the ones that get repaired, and most of us are not very good at repairing relationships. So, hence the fifth of the 5 questions.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's this sense also of being open to a repair attempt also, because
Yeah,
I think people make the effort to try and repair it, but then they're rebuffed by it. And then at that point, it's just sort of like I think in John Gottman's work, one of the things that he says is it only takes like 2 or 3 either turning away or turning against that a person is like, I'm done, I'll never speak of this again, and so it
yeah,
doesn't. It's amazing. In the States, there's, and it may be in other places also, I don't think we invented this, but there's this sort of saying that's like, 1 aw shucks counteracts 5 attaboys, right? This idea of, and that really fits with John Gottman's 5-to-1 imbalance towards the positive in a relationship.
yes,
And so, I mean, that's the other thing, this sense of like, how do I manage myself so that I'm have the capacity, even if I'm upset with something, to that earlier point, stimulus response, what am I going to do in that space? How do I create that gap so
yeah,
that I can choose another response, so that I don't just blow you out of the water because like I'm mad right now?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a really big topic. It's a really hard topic. I mean, in the heart of the book is this idea of building a best possible relationship with somebody. So, not a perfect relationship, because depending on who the other person is, some of them are going to be more towards the amazing end of the bell curve, and some of them are going to be more towards the less amazing end of the bell curve. But each relationship has this potential to be the best version of itself. And the 3 attributes that are part of a BPR: is it safe, which we've kind of touched on? Is it vital, which you can think of as psychological bravery, as a balance to psychological safety? And then the third element is repairability. And when I teach this and I ask people which of those 3 elements are you best at, it's kind of often split between safe and vital. And there are very few people who say I'm pretty good at repairability. So it feels like a big being that people would like, I'd like to know more about this because this is hard.
Yeah.
And I realized that, uh, working relationships, I mean, as you said, this is human. So this kind of, a bunch of the stuff works in all relationships, but my focus is managers in particular. Um, um, working relationships, mostly self-repair. Like if there's a disruption and a tear in the fabric, necessity means that kind of we carry on. You can't just leave.
Right.
So
I have a
there's
mortgage.
yeah, exactly. And so we just kind of work, but we work less well. Something's a bit damaged, even if it self heals, it doesn't knit back together perfectly. And of course, what's powerful about repair is often that actually is a strengthening act to the thing. Back to your other Michael, it's like, this is when I start to trust a relationship. If you've worked together to fix something, you're both showing a commitment to the relationship. You're both showing a degree of vulnerability. You're both figuring out some stuff. In some ways, it actually is a way that the relationship gets a bit smarter and wiser and more resilient.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, also about like, what is the conversation we need to have about how we will be with each other? When I got married to this Michael, well, before we got married, like in the dating process, we had conversations about how will we handle disagreements? How will we handle these things as they come up? And I've done that in all the work of with all the clients that I work with also,
Yeah,
because going back to our very first, part of this conversation, when you're looking at issues of dichotomies of power, I start off most of my coaching sessions with, look, I am of this, and I come from a perspective, and that may not be a realistic or useful perspective for you. So you have my permission to push back on me. You have my
Right.
permission to call me out on stuff or say I don't like something or
Right.
I don't agree. And I think that's part of that repairability also, is that you set into, not, I assume you know this because I'm just a nice person, but like you specifically name ways that people can be safe with you when there
Yeah.
is a disruption. And I think that leads to repairability. The other thing, and I'm curious what you think about this, is how we respond to issues. Like if we say, my door is open, you can come to me with anything. I'm your manager. I've got candy on my desk because I want you coming into my office and telling me everything. And each time somebody does that, we go, why are you bothering me? Like, right? Like, what are we truly communicating, and how do we
Yeah.
begin to fix that? Because our behavior is out of alignment with our words at that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's tricky I mean, all of this stuff is tricky to navigate. Humans are confusing and messy and irrational and inconsistent. I'm just talking about myself here. Maybe this resonates with people
I'll
listening as
join the
well.
party.
Yeah. So, um, you know, part of how we learn and grow about ourselves is the feedback that we get. And if you've got this kind of tension, which is like you're inviting me in, but you're repelling me at the same time, uh, you know, if you're lucky, that person then goes, I'm seeing the dichotomy here and the contradiction, but they may never get there because um, that's the way we operate. It's the way our brains operate. You can hold these two incompatible things together and go, "That, but I'm fine. I don't really see. My intention is good." That insight that you're much more forgiving about your own inconsistent behavior because you understand your intention, and you're like, "Look, I get that. I sort of screwed that up. I have a good intention," and you're much harsher about other people's inconsistent behavior because you don't know their intention. They're just like, "You said this and you're doing this." It's like, what's wrong with you? You're nuts.
Yeah.
Um, but this idea of like, so do you know how to give feedback well? And are you brave enough, courageous enough to give people feedback? Um, and that's another underdeveloped skill for people. Kim Scott will call it radical candor. But for me, so it's like kind of, these aren't her words exactly, but I use fierce love as a way of like, okay, I want to be on your side, but I'm going to be kind of bold about it, not timid about it. But I use a model based from kind of derived from nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg. And so I'm like, okay, so in this situation, there's the facts, there's my feelings, there's my judgments, and then there's what I want from it. Those are the four buckets. And a big part of giving feedback is just kind of untangling that stuff in my head. The fact is, you told me it was an open door policy. And when I came in through your open door, you went, "Can you leave me alone, please?" And you were not smiling. My judgment, my feeling is like confused, angry, sad, upset. My judgments are, you're a hypocrite, you're an idiot. And you judge yourself like it's an open door policy for everybody else but me because I'm not good enough.
Right.
And then you'll what you want is like, I just want clarity about what you mean by an open door policy. It doesn't sound like it's always open. So can you tell me when it's a good time to use your open door and when it's not a good time?
Could you
Or something
please put
else.
a light up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I think also it speaks to, not only when is it a good time, I think I also want to be heard, right? Like, I mean, in the work that I've done, I think 99% of the people on the planet don't actually feel heard by other people. And so what are
Yeah.
we communicating when we say, I want to hear you, but I don't?
It's like, it turns out there's probably in a more profound way than I've realized before, is fundamentally, if you can have people feeling seen and feeling heard, that's such a determining factor as to how this person's going to show up.
Yeah.
And how this person shows up has an influence on your culture in an organization, and how your culture is humming has an influence on how your strategy gets developed. So if you want a successful organization where people are actually working on the most important stuff, which is ideally what happens when you have a strategy, then you need a culture that supports that, because that means you've got the best people working on the most important stuff. And if you've got a culture that's humming, you need the best people to go, they see me and they get that I'm one of their best people, and they're using my soft and hard skills to do that work.
Yeah. And just from a coaching perspective, I do a lot of coach development. And from a coaching perspective, I know you're really looking organizationally, but as a coach, if you can't hold the space for curiosity, if you can't really truly hear your clients who are
Yeah.
coming to you and paying you to be heard because they haven't been heard anywhere else, and you begin to become the advice monster as a coach, right?
Yeah.
It's just another level of, yet here again, I'm not
Yeah.
being heard. And so I just don't even know that we can overemphasize the importance of being seen and heard. And in
And
your
one of the paradoxes I've learned about this is how often silence is one of the most powerful actions of helping somebody feel seen and feel heard. Um, it's just, if they say something and you just allow it to have the space to kind of land and not be talked over or solved or fixed or whatever. But this idea of like my silence is my presence. My presence is me seeing you and hearing you. It can remove some of the anxiety that sometimes coaches have, which is like, I've got to be adding value. And the way I add value is through, action and words. And I'm like, sometimes you add value just by going, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerfully important, the presence of being able, and that goes back to also that discomfort that we're talking about, whether it's the discomfort to be in a difficult conversation, the discomfort to bring up a difficult topic, the discomfort to let go of power, the discomfort of being in silence with somebody else and not needing to come up with a solution. I think we
Yeah.
sometimes just don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you, but when I have a sense, I have a question about what's your passion, but I have a sense of your passion from this conversation, because it just seems
Well,
like,
tell me what your sense is, because I'm never I find that like a difficult question to ask. It's not really a word that I use a lot about myself. So what's your sense of what my passion is?
oh, so my sense of your passion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm taking a guess here, is just your amazing curiosity about the messiness of the human experience.
Um, I I wouldn't directly nod yes to that, but it's close.
Okay.
It's I'm not sure it's my passion, but I've got a kind of I do feel a deep commitment to try and bring out the best of people
Mhm.
in a non-glib way. It's I get a bit irritated by the kind of, the how superficial some kind of like human development stuff can be, which is like the 10 easy steps to gaining enlightenment. And I'm like,
Check.
you know, we're such a weird life form, and our brains are so complicated in terms of conning us, in terms of kind of getting through life. I mean, we've got this, just even this basic biological fact that your unconscious brain decides what to do, and then your conscious brain kind of confirms that half a second later. It's like, so as somebody once said, you don't have free will, you have free won't. And so we have this bizarre sense of individuality and autonomy and rational choice, most of which is an illusion. So there is something about the miraculousness of us as human beings, and how do you help people continue to kind of live fully into all of that.
I love that. I think you said your non-passion, your deep curiosity, much better.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. I really do. What are you reading? Like, what's on your bedside table as far as reading material goes right now? And what are you paying attention to?
Well, I'm reading Don Quixote, Cervantes' fantastic novel, which I've read before. But a friend of mine, Austin Kleon, just reread a new translation, so I picked that up and I started to read that. I'm reading Gilgamesh, which is a Babylonian epic from 4,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. I'm reading a book called, what is it? I can't remember the title of it exactly, but it's called Facilitating Change of some sort, or Transformative Facilitation. Yeah, I can't quite remember. But the book that I will be publishing in 2025 is going to be about how change happens in organizations. So I'm starting to do some preliminary reading about who are the people who I think have got, I mean, change, there's so many books about change and so much noise about change and so much not useful content around change out in the world. As always, I'm trying to find the signal and trying to simplify it and translate it so people go, okay, you've cleared up a whole bunch of stuff for me.
It's not easy, but it's not impossible either. There's
right.
clarity to it.
Yeah, so trying to read around that. So those are 3 books that I got going on at the moment.
That's quite a list. Gilgamesh is. I really enjoyed both Don Quixote and Gilgamesh myself. I haven't read them in years though, so you're kind of like sparking my. I think maybe I should do that.
Right. There's so many good books to read though. It's hard.
Yeah, they're both fascinating though. Like really just looking at our human experience yet again. Yeah. What is an insight? Because you are somebody who has become quite successful and through accidental decisions, luck, stumbling into the right spaces at the right time.
Yeah.
What is some insight that you might share to a coach or somebody who's on the journey towards whatever is success for them in just honoring the journey? Or I don't know what's showing up for you in regard to that question, but I'd be really curious what you might share with somebody who's looking at you and like, yes, I don't have to be Michael, but I want to be successful in my own way, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to be successful in my own way is quite a big statement. And it's really worth trying to figure out what being successful in your own way actually means. When I started in the world of coaching 25 years ago, I thought being successful was having a successful coaching practice. But, I built a coaching practice and then discovered I don't actually enjoy having a coaching practice. So I dismantled it because I like teaching and I like writing and I like performing. And I found coaching too anonymous, too unscalable, and a bit boring at times. And I was like, that was quite a surprise. I wasn't expecting that at all. I really thought this was the thing for me. So it's to stay kind of curious, I guess, around what actually does success mean to you. What makes you happy, and what feels like success for you. So there's that. Often that can be getting clear about who do you serve. Who are you there to amplify and make stronger and make better in the world? So getting a sense of clarity around that. Then I think there is, I wrote a book a year ago, about a year and a half ago, called How to Begin. And the subtitle is Start Doing Something That Matters. And at the heart of that is this idea of how do you set a worthy goal? So, and a worthy goal needs to be thrilling and important and daunting. So thrilling meaning it lights you up. So this requires a degree of self-knowledge around, well, who are you and what are your values and what is success? It needs to be important, meaning that it serves the world, makes the world a better place. As somebody said, it gives more to the world than it takes. And it needs to be daunting, meaning it takes you to the edge of who you are and what you know and who you've been. It kind of builds on this insight that we unlock our greatness by working on the hard stuff. So find your hard stuff to work on. And, there is, so that's quite a lot there, which is like, as you think about what that is for you, you take your best guess at a worthy goal. If people look at me and they see some degree of success, I've been in the space for over 20 years. So I've just been around for a while. You mostly just hear about my successes. So you're like, oh, I've heard about his coaching habit book and this, but you haven't heard about all the stuff that I've kind of stumbled around, and they didn't fail disastrously, but they just, they were mediocre or they didn't work. Then I think the other piece is like, it can be lonely doing this stuff. So find your people and get the support around you, whether that is, setting up your own mastermind group. I had a mastermind group that we hung out together for 15 years and we kind of supported each other to try and figure stuff out. As connected to the How to Begin book, we have something called the Conspiracy, which is like a group of people working on their worthy goals together. And so there's a kind of a community that we're building there. Excuse me. Or it can be you hire a coach. I've done all three of those things. But it's find the people around you who will support you and encourage you and push you and kind of not fall for your own deluded, collusion with mediocrity, which we all have. And then there's this difficult question about knowing when to quit. I think people tend to have a bias to one way or the other. They either quit too soon or they quit too late. I tend to quit too late. I'm like overly loyal. People who I work with, they know that one of my patterns is slow, fast, where I'm too slow to make a decision. But when I finally figure it out, it's a really fast decision.
Done.
Yeah, but it's like, know what your pattern is. Do you quit too soon or do you quit too late? Mm-hmm. And manage that, I guess. So as you keep looking at yourself and what you're doing, sometimes you're like, yeah, good try, and that didn't work. And iterate or pivot. You figure out what your worthy goal is. You commit to a process. And the outcome you kind of don't get to control, so you hope for the best. In the Conspiracy, and this is just a tool that people might want to use, in their own lives. But in the Conspiracy, we set people up in small groups of 4 or 5, so they've got their people to travel with, and then they work in a 6-week burst. It's a chapter, and then they take a week or 2 off to reorient and kind of vacuum the house, and then they do another 6-week burst. And at the start of the 6 weeks, they kind of claim, this is what I'm going to try and do over the next 6 weeks. And we find that the 6-week cycle, it's long enough to get a lot of stuff done. Like, you can do a lot in 6 weeks if you put your mind to it. But also, if you have an unsuccessful 6 weeks and you work on the wrong thing or it doesn't come off, it's only 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's not so devastating. Like, I spent 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's 12% of a year. It's nothing in the big scheme of things. So 6 weeks feels an interesting, flexible period of time, which it's big enough and it's also short enough to be helpful. So work in 6-week cycles and go, right, here's my best guess about the best thing I can be doing right now. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be really committed to it. And then after 6 weeks, stop and look around going, okay, where am I now?
Yeah, and I love this idea. I mean, we hear about masterminds and people paying for masterminds, but honestly, you can get a group of people who you trust and who can say to you, Michael, is this a slow, 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 fast? Like, where are
Yeah,
you in this, right? And to
yeah,
have those people that you trust who will say, I don't know if I'm right. I'm going to just ask you, and you can sit with it. And then you can go, where am I in this cycle? And
right.
am I holding on too long? Or is this a place where I need to hold on just a little bit longer? And
Yeah,
I think your point is incredibly important, especially from that sort of entrepreneurial perspective of, I think so many people quit too quickly because I think there's this sort of, I don't know. It's kind of like you've been in the space for 20 odd years and you're an instant success, but they're not seeing the 15 to 20 years that built to the place that they see
yeah.
you right now. And
And honestly, I'm as much as I am, I'm probably a big-ish fish in a pretty small pond. I'm relatively well known in the world of coaching, which means that I'm almost entirely unknown by everybody on the entire planet. And I know there's bits of me that I'm like, I should be better known, damn it. Um, and I'm still trying to work and trying to get a little bit better known by other people. But um, yeah, so I'm like, what people know of me, it's like a social media feed. It's part fantasy, part made up, part true.
yeah. And just I just want to just say how much fun I've had having this conversation with you today. And thank
Thanks,
you.
Lyssa.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the coaching studio. Um, I will be making links to all of your books, and I will be posting links to your LinkedIn and your Instagram and your website and sending people your direction.
Thank you.
I mean, thank you so very much for your time today. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Yeah, thanks again, Lyssa.